chances.
The thing is if we're talking about why men are afraid of women, it's because I can't speak for
why men are afraid of
why women are afraid of men. Sorry, I misspoke.
Okay.
I could almost bet that every woman at this table, or I know like at least 99% of the women I know in my life have been a victim to a man in some form, whether it was sexually or physically. They're kind of the same thing, but in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, whether they're an OF worker or a sex worker or not.
But I don't believe it. So here's the thing, right? Like, I don't actually believe
100%
that this
of
is
women
so.
have been-
What I think happens instead, and the stats bear this out as well, is that things which women would consider to be SA, men just simply do not. So, for instance, unwarranted touching by women towards men just disregard it, whereas women will often freak out about it. So I'm not so... and by the way, I also have the Cardinal Wilson rule, and here's the Cardinal Wilson rule. If there was no police report, I don't fucking believe you. Mm-hmm. That's my actual rule. If there was no police report, right, then I think that the chances that it actually happened in a significant way are not true. That's my own personal rule for this.
Well, even if there's no police report, it's not going to get processed. It just sits on in most states.
Been there, done that.
Well, okay, but there's still a report, right?
Yeah, no, I'm saying that.
So that's the thing is like, that's my rule, right? Is that there's so many of these which end up being unfounded. The women won't say the name of the person. And this is, like, I think, the reason that the women won't come forward with the names of these supposed SA assaulters is because then that man would have an opportunity to refute those charges. And so they don't want to do that because it would actually be a false allegation.
It's
so what they do is they say, no, I had this happen to me. And you ask for details. You say, well, where, when, why, how did that happen?
You don't always
have proof. And
proof.
suddenly, hang on, let me finish. I'm almost done. And then suddenly the details go right out the window. And they won't name who these people are. They won't tell you that there was a police report. They won't say any of those things. So I struggle myself to believe that a lot of women are telling the truth about these situations.
As a man, you are more likely to be raped yourself than you are to be wrongfully accused of doing so.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Our word is
But
our
you are more
woman
likely to
or
be
man?
assaulted yourself than you are to be wrongfully accused of doing so.
I don't know if there's data
No,
on
there's
that.
the evidence for this is extremely scant, in fact. So the thing is that while it is, I think I could even grant this and still destroy the argument. So even if I granted that that was true, then there's still a huge swath of women who will make the claim that they were SA'd by men, but not give any particulars. So there's no way for us to make a determined verification that it's so.
Is there?
So I'm not sure that stat would even be valid.
Where are you coming up with your stat of all these women who are alive? Like, what's the validity
My
in that?
stat
Just
of what?
you feel that way? Like, what?
Do you want me to repeat what I just said?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so what I said is I'm not sure that we can say that this stat could ever be completely true that you just reference about SA either direction. And the reason is because by your logic, there's tons and tons of women, right, who are SA'd, but they don't come forward with the fact that they were SA'd, right? So if that is true,
Sure,
then
but that's
logically
not
would
really
not
what
the same be true for men? I guess that's my question.
That guy Slingshot donated $199. And to go further on what Andrew said, those who wait 10 or 15 years to say something about SA, which usually is with a celebrity, I think is nothing more than a money grab in most cases.
In those,
I agree.
In those
Could
cases,
be
I think
regret.
it is more likely for false allegations to come. But just because a woman doesn't report an assault doesn't mean it didn't happen. And I think that's a very dangerous mindset to have, to automatically
I think it's
not
the
agree
least
a
dangerous
woman
mindset to have.
just because there wasn't a police report filed. And by the way, there's different types of sexual assault that isn't our wording. There's other things as well. So.
No, I agree. But then when we get into the particulars of those things, what we find out is that men often will disregard what women will consider to be SA, even though the same exact thing is happening to them in reverse by women. That's point one. Point two is that if it's not reported, then how can we count it as being true? We just basically have to take people's words for it. There's no real reason that we should do that absent evidence. That would be the opposite of how we should conduct any type of study into the SA phenomenon.
you're not referring to children, are you? Just women?
Yeah, I'm talking about women here.
Okay.
Who are adults. So when we're talking about adult women, this is just my cardinal rule that I have, is that tons and tons of women who I've talked to have these SA stories, but however, when pressed for particulars, suddenly the story completely falls apart. Most notably, the fact that they won't name the men who supposedly did this to them. Interestingly enough, I think that the logical reason that I came to for why they do not, is because if they named that man, you'd find out that he was in Kentucky while she was in Wyoming and she was full of shit. That's my personal feeling on the thing.
Can I say one thing? So, I guess the biggest thing is that I don't have the numbers, and it would be hard to find proper numbers on this anyway. But a lot of now women were sexually assaulted when they were children. And that's when it took place. If we're talking about children.
We're not talking about...
Yeah,
no, I think
about children.
The point
That's
that
child abuse. I mean, that's a whole different conversation.
So in this particular case, we can leave that to the side, right? I'm talking about women who are making the claims of being SA as adults. We're being hyper-specific here. We're not talking about the cases of children, though I'd be happy to get into it. We're not going to because it's YouTube and it's TOS. I'm talking specifically about adult women. So this is, from my perspective, if I look at this logically, if somebody makes an accusation, says such thing happened to me, but there's no evidence for it, that would be, a secularist would never, for instance, accept that from a Christian saying, oh, God talked to me, but I can't prove it, and I can't demonstrate it, and I can't show it. So why is it in the world should we accept the counter from women that they make these bold claims that this and that happened to them, absent any evidence that it did?
I'm probably going to get a lot of woman hate from this, but I actually agree with Andrew 100%, at least 95%, because I personally do know a lot of women who have made these claims just because they regret it afterwards. And I'm like, it's almost become like this fucked up trend, just like people think it's cool now to have like some type of mental disorder where it's like, oh, like I'm a victim. Like it's cool to be a victim. And that pisses me off. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
It pisses me off.
Well, it should. And the truth is that if you follow behavior in voting by women and you follow trends in buying by women, you'll note that peer pressure, even towards things which are not considered to be great, if it brings women attention, they will follow trends which are not even good for them to follow.
Agreed.
This now, men do this too. I'm not being biased here and saying it's only women. I'm just saying that women are more prone to that. That's why propaganda works so well on them. That's how they were able to get an entire generation of women to begin smoking, was because they were so susceptible to that propaganda. So I would actually have to agree with you as well that as I look at this, it's hard for me to believe that that the kind of rampant stats on what is considered SA are anything short of lies, essentially, absent proof.
And Andrew, I'm sure you could agree with me on this. I think we both think here that SA is an absolutely terrible thing, awful thing.
Awful thing. Put them against the wall, as they say.
Yeah. I do think though that there is
but that's why the burden of proof should be so high. The burden of proof should be so high because the punishment should be so overwhelming. So the punishment for something like this should be overwhelming towards a man who conducts this. And that's why we should be very careful about the particulars of how justice is served up here. And we should have evidence for this so that we can definitely put these people where they belong, which is in prison for life.
Yeah. And they have done, they have looked at an analysis, comparing this to other crimes, and what they found to be provably false, where the woman either recanted the story and there was proof that he was somewhere else, or she, I think I already said she recanted it, or she proved that she was lying. In comparison to other kinds of crime reports, the rate I think is 2x or even 3x the rate of like false accusations of other kinds of crimes. And then I specifically actually want to point out something that happens to minority men at even further disproportionate rates. I don't know if you know the case of Emmett Till, the boy who was falsely accused by a white woman back in the, I believe it was in the 50s or And they lynched him.
Okay, wait, now.
Wait.
Okay, well, I'll just be quiet there.
Oh.
We're not exactly sure that it was. I've heard it conflicted as to.
Well, my understanding on her.
There's no proof, though.
My understanding on her deathbed. This woman on her deathbed, the woman who accused it, recanted and said that she made it up. At least that's the research that I did.
I remember reading that
maybe,
too. Yeah.
I could be wrong there. I don't want to throw shade at anybody unless I know for sure that it's true. So,
if my research serves me correct, I do believe that she later in her life she said, I either embellished, I exaggerated, or I just made the whole thing up. But what happened to Emmett Till, this young black boy, he apparently flirted, said something, lascivious to a white woman, and her family or friends, whatever, I don't know the exact details, lynched him, killed him. And so false accusations happen all the time, and they actually specifically tend to negatively.
She was jealous of someone else.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, he had.
But this actually happens at higher rates too. Typically, when you see white woman, black man, it happens at a much higher frequency. It happened to Patrice O'Neal, rest in peace. Happens to frequently black men because there's an added level, at least for some of these white women, who, for example, have consensual sex with them, and then they regret it for there's perhaps racist reasons for it, but there's a component of regret here. They regret it. Like if you hook up with somebody consensually and you later regret it, that's not SA.
No, it's not.
But you
see this. Well, you can also see this same trend happen with the lies of paternity, which is far more prevalent than previously was understood with DNA testing. So now we know that the amount of paternity fraud is, in some cases it's been estimated as high as 20%. I think that might be a wildly high estimate, to be honest with you. And I think that the evidence for that is somewhat scant. But it's definitely more prevalent than we thought it was. There's no doubt that that's true. We're not saying that SA against women may not be prevalent from men. It probably is. We're just disputing as to whether or not the justification for why you should not be around men based on these kind of wildly inflated numbers is justified. That's the point we're making.
What if we talk about biology and the fact that men are a lot stronger than women? And so I would, let's say, like if I had to choose, obviously, to fight a woman or a man, I'm going to choose the woman because I wouldn't be able to protect myself against a man that wanted to harm me.
Yeah, sure. But nobody would dispute that. This is why the question was about a bear or a man. Bear's obviously
it's just a factor.
But a bear is obviously much stronger than a man, right?
I said I would rather be a man, but.
Yeah, but we weren't making the comparison as to whether or not men are stronger than women. Obviously, that's true. Generally speaking, that's true. Even weaker men are stronger than even strong women in many cases. So, we wouldn't dispute this, but that would not lead to the conclusion that means that the prevalence of SA as advertised is as high as it's advertised.
I don't know. Back to the bear thing, though, I feel like
I don't want anything to do with that.
If women were truly this scared of men, as they love to pretend they are, like there wouldn't be such rampant casual sex occurring. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't be getting drunk around men, partying, being alone with men, having male friends, all this stuff. So I don't know. It seems like logic would dictate that a man would be safer than a bear, but
it's sad to say, but honestly, like you're far more likely to be, assaulted by someone you know than someone you don't know, like a strange man.
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah,
that's a good point. It's like,
I agree that the predatory behavior in that regard works both ways. For instance, I have the data here as well when you're talking about, for instance, women who are in positions of authority over men, which would include minors inside of prison, where there's female prison guards, the SA skyrockets in comparison to the other way. The same thing happens when you're talking about teachers, for instance. Even when you're talking about clergy, while it's true that more men conduct these things, as a percentage of how many are in these positions, women conduct them against men far more. which is interesting. So I'm not so willing to just say that this is a problem which comes from men and only men.
I'm not saying it is. Why do you think it is that it's more prevalent for women, or like let's say teachers, to prey on male students? I'm just wondering. Like,
this is an interesting question.
Opposed to child abuse?
I'm not so sure that anybody knows exactly why, but I think it's due to the fact of basically being able to manipulate and gain attention. But it's hard to say. This is a phenomenon which may have been going on for a long time, just kind of unrecognized because, again, when we're talking about SA, this is one of my points when I say that men often will disregard things that women would consider SA. There's a lot, and this is the truth. Nobody's going to like to hear this, but there are young men probably who are 16, 17 years old who bang their teacher and aren't upset about it, right? Yeah. I mean, that's probably just true.
That's grooming, though. That's not okay for those men. That's not
okay.
They were 100% groomed.
No, I'm not disputing
assaulted.
that. I'm not disputing that it is. I'm saying that the way that it would be perceived by a male versus how it's perceived by women are different. And that's why I'm saying that we can't hold the dualistic standard when it comes to this.
I agree with you.
You see what I'm saying? So, I mean, I don't disagree with you. It's absolutely SA. I mean, and they're underage, everything else. It's horrible.
Is it because
I'm just
society
saying that
tells them that it's cool?
I got to move it on. Perception.